Hello, I'm Adam Borg, and this is my presentation on Cultural Plunge. I'm doing my presentation on my uncle Darren. My uncle is a tradie and has been for 34 years. As did most boys, back when he went to school, he dropped out and started an apprenticeship at the age of 16. Leaving school at 16, Darren also, like his father and my grandfather, was a tradie at a young age. It isn't a great opportunity for young men, but there are some serious issues with this and links to education and culture. Starting with an obvious issue with dropping out at a young age. Looking back and looking at it now, the lack of education surrounding tradies and dropping out at a young age can really affect later on in life. Not having enough understanding in society is a really big one. We see on the news, and it's been around for at least 40, 50 years, not enough understanding with society and how we're meant to react with things as tradies, and just understanding, like, we think things to do with drinking, smoking, it's all part of the culture that happens with dropping out and becoming a tradie, and then you lose that valuable information you need to be at school with those extra few years, and then if you go on to do further studying. That is a serious issue that we'll be discussing. Other issues such as basic grammar skills. If they decide to drop out and they don't further on in their career being a tradie, they don't have much skills to go on with. A lot of them, unfortunately, dropping out at the age you haven't quite, at the age of 16, probably understood the basics. You might have a brief, but just enough, as Uncle Darren has put it here. General habits picked up as well, so habits we see on the news, I think it's 1 in every 3 women get hit, and a lot of these statistics were coming from tradies and young men dropping out, which Darren has spoken about to me, and how he's worked with people that come into work and will explain it. So obviously it's not just my Uncle Darren, it's other tradies and the lack of education surrounding some serious issues as well, not just the obvious issues. And then as well, if they do drop out and start an apprenticeship, their role model is going to be their boss, and that's where I think, I'll talk about it more later, is where that needs to change, and that's what he thinks as well, that needs to change to further on, to help educate these young men, young boys essentially becoming into young men. Other issues such as treating of females, that's a big one as well that we hear with tradies. The tradie talk, as my uncle's put it here, is it's hard to, you don't talk about that sort of stuff, which is an issue as well in itself, not talking about the issues that really need to be spoken about. So issues to deal with women and partner, you don't speak about, and it's hidden, and that's what we really need to open up and have open discussions about. And then probably all of these issues now link under the banner of culture, the stigma and the culture around a tradie. Even now you think about tradies and you just think what it would be to be like, and you probably imagine having a smoke and a beer, and that's what my uncle here has put. That's what he honestly thought it was going to be like, and you're just drawn into a culture, as he's put it here, an unhealthy culture, and it really needs to change. So that's what my Uncle Darren has given to me in this interview. So we haven't recorded, he's all written it down, so he didn't want to be recorded talking about this, but it really gives us an insight view to how there's so many little issues that need to be heard here. And then reflecting on it, Uncle Darren, my uncle, for him it's quite hard to reflect. Trying to influence himself and educate is hard now, because dropping out at the age of 16, it's hard for him. He's found it quite hard to adjust with technology, even little things such as technology as well, trying to understand and how to work those things as well, and being inclusive and talking to people. He went to an all-boys school and dropped out, and connection with the other gender at times is quite hard. So that's pretty much all that we've talked about, and how that there's quite a lot of issues that we need to go over here, which we can link back most likely to obviously starting with the parents, and then going down to dropping out at such a young age at 16. I'm not sure if we need to move that up, if any case, to help out the generations coming through with a high rate of people dropping out at 16. But so that's him reflecting on it. So now talk about my reflection and how the connection between one's culture and identity in relationship to the readings in the subject. So the readings so I'm trying to find the page. So the readings about social justice and gender equality by Susan Penji Chipoli and Will Letts and Bob Mayan. Reading their articles is a great way to sum it up, and how social justice is not just for all tradies, but for there's obviously some other instance, but for tradies there's a lot to do with social justice and gender equality. So my personal reflection on this is there needs to be more of an understanding. No matter how young they are, we can help these kids, and even if they do drop out and become an apprentice, they still have to do part-time studying to stay involved, take classes, to keep themselves educated so they don't lose touch with society in a way. Also an understanding of perspective. I mean, it's quite hard, well, for me anyways, I can't relate back because my uncle has been a tradie and his grandfather a tradie. My dad is an office worker, and it's completely different culture to how my uncle's grown up, and they're totally two different people. So doing this cultural plunge has given me a perspective about how it can be just to be lonely. Like a tradie, you're working with one or two people a day, and you're with them for 10 years and you don't get any other contact other than that. It'd be quite hard. So I've been giving us perspective of that, and maybe bringing in an education to help them, bringing in things such as classes or TAFE would really benefit these guys. And then if we can teach them about culture, they can create the new culture to bring into our next generation, which can help, and let them know they have options. They have options to educate themselves while doing their apprenticeship and then going on to be fully accredited. And then the readings such as other cultural discriminations, which is really a good one. If you drop out at 16, you're not going to quite... I know I couldn't relate back. I didn't learn about discrimination until I was probably about 18 and didn't fully understand the effects it can have. I think dropping out at 16, you're still a young boy. You're not going to have open views and perspective, which is quite hard to understand at first. And then moving on from that, I think this is all coming back to culture. And this task being cultural plunge, it's been quite eye-opening for myself. Reflecting on this, it's quite hard to read these readings by these accredited authors and to think they're actually true and that's actually what happens, and then talking and interviewing my uncle, it is true, and we really need to educate these kids more and they need to have a deeper understanding of these areas of issue. And then to finish off on the final touches, I've pretty much reiterated it all, but I think there's some really insightful ideas I think I've raised here, and then interviewing Uncle Darren, such as things as inclusive and belonging. These things need to start happening at young level at tradies. I think putting forward a proposal to the government would be a really great start, and then these young men can build into men